everyone to this session with a guest lecture. My name is Mike Marquez. I'm a professor for sports marketing at the Master of Sports Communication. We actually, in my class, I always do case studies and try to bring people from the industry to discuss those. We normally discuss it with the students, and later on we bring the guest and talk about that. In this case, we're talking about the Formula One, and it's definitely a relevant topic because the school asked to open up the discussion to everyone. So thanks for joining. And this session is going to be, the session is going to be recorded, so it's going to be accessible for everyone afterwards. And the idea is it's going to be a fireside chat with our guest. So discussion. Please put yourself in mute, but if you have questions, just raise your hand and interrupt. Interrupt or ask to raise your hand, we'll ask you. And I think if we can make an interactive session, it will be very, very good. The idea is to do around 30, 40, 45 minutes, maybe 1 hour if the topics allow for that. Maybe for the ones who were not this morning in the sports marketing session, we were discussing what happened when Liberty Media bought the Formula One 4 years ago in 2017. And put in perspective, and that year, the Formula One was losing audience gradually. And they had lost around 30% of the audience in the last, from 2008 to 2006. They were a very European-based fan base. There was in the US, the biggest sports market. There was pretty much no one watching, if you want. I would claim like that. And compared to the typical major leagues, where the average revenue per fan, the Formula One was below average, big time. And as well, another interesting thing was at that time, 2016, 17, the average huge fan was almost 40 years old, so quite old. And it's also based because of the old former boss, Bernie Ecclestone, who also said very clearly, I don't care about the young people. I don't care about social media. I don't understand it. I just want to go to people who have money. This is what my sponsors want. Then Liberty Media came, and 4 years later, the picture has changed big time. And the US it's a growth. It has a huge success. And I wouldn't want to talk to our guest today is Jan Lefort. He's been the last 4 years, he was the commercial and marketing director of one of the teams, the Sauber Alfa Romeo team. But also, and very interestingly, not only he was during this revolution or this change, he was part of the Formula One, but he also was worked for the Formula One at the beginning of the century with Lucky Strike and Rothmans, and also you were a personal manager of Jacques Villeneuve for a while. Mm-hmm. Jan, thanks for joining, and my first question actually, the connection is a bit, I don't know, I see you a bit not perfect, but I hope everyone sees you. Yeah. But sort of tell us, what was the big difference between Liberty and before? What did they do to change this dramatically?
Yeah, I think you're right. It was a huge shift of culture in the way the business was run. We didn't probably see it coming straight away because I think for the teams, or when you were working in the paddock, you didn't realize what was happening behind the scenes. However, I think what made the difference is the fact that Liberty is a American culture company. So the sports business is totally different from what we were used to. And I like to compare, always take, for example, the NFL as a reference. And I think we'll come back to that during the conversation. And I think that there are a lot of hints when you see how F1 today is actually marketed, that they probably use NFL as a reference. So there was a difference mainly in the accessibility when I say accessibility, I'm talking about how we give access to content, how we give access to fans behind the scenes, etc., which mainly happen through social. So that was one of the key changes. We suddenly the teams were able to start producing content for their sponsors and for their fans. Of course, it's still very limited. You cannot do whatever you want. You have a lot of restrictions when it comes to actually producing content. You have times before, like a blackout before, during, and after sessions. You're not able to film outside the hospitality in theory, and all that kind of guidelines. However, teams now can promote themselves completely differently to how they were promoted in the past, because it was, purely just print media, radio and TV, and mainly TV. And as you all know, Formula One business at the time was built on 100% on TV revenues. Um, Today it has shifted a little bit, but okay, TV is still very important, but it still has, you still see that there's a shift in some other areas of business. And that exactly the transition also took over when the famous Netflix Drive to Survive started to operate in the paddock in 2018. And I think this was really what changed the face of the sport, um, because it provided a different way of consuming the sport, or different aspect to the sport that behind the scenes people knew about, all the business aspect and what was going on, the politics, the rivalries between the teams, principals, the drivers, etc. We've heard of it, but with thanks to Drive to Survive, we actually could experience it pretty much in front of our screen. We'll come back to that point, because that was a very interesting transition in terms of culture, and I'd like to probably address a couple of points on that front. And the last bit was, I think, a little bit more of um, access to the assets. So Formula One wanted to give a little bit more access to fans. When I'm talking to, generally I'm talking about events there, um, whereby people visiting races, or attending events, have more interactions with what's going on on the track. There are autograph sessions, Q&As are organized for the fans, a lot more access to the experience in general, which was at the time was very, I'm talking 90s 2000s, was extremely secluded. You had really the paddock and the fans, and there was hardly any interaction. Mm-hmm. So these for me are the three kind of areas that saw the biggest change in the last couple of decades. Just for you guys to remember, the business of Formula One is quite simple when you look at it. And if you want to simplify it, the revenue for a team is basically threefold. The first one is prize money, so the money that's generated from TV rights. The second revenue is sponsorship, or revenue stream is sponsorship, and the third revenue stream is usually what I call the contribution. Contribution is either a big brand, Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, but it could be also a privateer. You've got some teams out there today who are still owned by private guys, and therefore they contribute to the budget of the team, usually because the prize money and sponsorship does not cover the entire budget you need to run a Formula One team. So that's from an F1 team. From a F1 business, you probably
Jan, one question on that one. In terms of percentage, no? I was always thinking the sponsorship is the biggest chunk, but it's not true. It's the prize money, correct? Or not really?
That's a good question. Depends what side of the grid you are. If you are one of the top teams, for sure, you probably equal. Actually, when Mercedes a couple of years ago probably was equal in terms of prize money and sponsorship, and actually the budget. And I'm talking before cost cap. and it was probably the only team which was breaking even or actually making a bit of profit there. Today with cost cap, things are a little bit different, but to answer your question more precisely, I think for a midfield team, you probably have a equal contribution and sponsorship income, because then your prize money is a bit is lower, because of your ranking in the championship. The ranking in championship was not, completely, how can I say, it was not kind of a stable curve. It was incremental. There was some special income for special teams like Ferrari, for example. Historic teams, you've got special bonuses for bigger teams, and so it's not so easy to understand. But in any case, the new regulations that came into play a couple of years ago have done a lot better in terms of redistributing the money across the teams. Hence, this is another element for which I think F1 is now booming, because the business of Formula One is actually potentially a good business if you're an investor. And this is what we've seen, for example, Audi coming in recently into the sport, or actually buying in. This morning or yesterday, the announcement was made that Audi bought already 25% of Sauber, and they will keep putting 25% until 26. So that means that the business of Formula One is actually something that is now making sense. It's not just purely either marketing money, or just because you're a billionaire and you just want to have fun. There's a business aspect, and I think F1 has done a very good job on that front too. So you've got the commercial aspect and the business aspect, and those two aspects have made Formula One what it is today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So just to recap, now you said the big three things that Liberty did, or it was the opening up the communication channels, no? So you could easily go out and engage with your sponsors, fans. Netflix, we'll go into that in a bit, and the sort of festival aspect that you had on the races, more access for the normal fans and everything. Okay.
So that's the marketing commercial aspect, and you're completely right. And then you have to think about the technical aspect and the business aspect on the other hand. So the technical aspect is the regulation. I'm sure we'll come back to that because that's a very important point. And the second aspect on the business front is the cost cap. So the cost cap is for everyone. I'm sure it's now all the teams are limited to 145 million of spent for operating the car. That budget excludes quite a lot of aspects such as driver salaries, marketing, and some other aspects. We're not going to go into the details of that, but I mean it still provides a limit for all the teams to actually build, develop, and operate a car. And it's actually quite interesting because it's probably gonna even up a little bit the field, in terms of results and in terms of how the teams can manage this cost cap.
Yeah, and one thing, I see you really, really bad quality on video. I don't know if it's only me.
I I'm feeling that this is.
Me too.
You cannot see me. I'm really sorry about that. I don't know what.
But again, we can hear you. We can hear you. No, I know it's better if you don't move. Wait a second.
Wait, I should not move.
I don't know. It's before going back to some. When I started teaching this case, I actually started with Formula E, several years ago, because the Formula E with the sustainability aspect, electric cars, driving in the middle of the cities, close to the people, it was looking that it's gonna take over the Formula One. This has not happened, and actually the Formula One is now claiming to be net zero by 2030.
Yeah.
And extremely, I think also Audi said they are going into the Formula One because of the sustainability aspect of it. Maybe, what's your thoughts compared to the Formula E, why is Formula One stronger as ever and Formula E is going down, if you want?
It's a very good question, Mike, on that, because I agree with you. I mean, at the beginning, there's a lot of hype around Formula E, and actually the promotion was extremely well done. The marketing of the series was very, very well done. So I don't think it's my place to point any fingers, or just maybe criticize or not the Formula E. But I think Formula E was facing a couple of challenges. The first one is, for me, the history. It's extremely hard, to create a product from scratch, specifically at this level. You need that history. You need that, that kind of authenticity when it comes to storytelling. And I use the example, say simply, whether you were a racing fan or not, you would probably have heard of, Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, Michael Schumacher, names like that. So the sport already had this kind of awareness, general awareness, global awareness, like a big brand. So it had a big advantage, because you don't need, probably Formula E needed, imagine the millions to promote the series at this level. The second point for me is definitely the fact that F1 has reacted about 2-3 years ago drastically on the sustainability topic. You're completely right, Mike. It was very funny, because up until 2018 or summer 18, I remember precisely, for them, the hybrid technology that was powering the cars, the engines were hybrid engines, was, for Formula One in general, Formula One and the governing bodies, a technology topic, so a technology story to tell, but not a sustainability story. And F1 has actually realized that F1 had a lot to say, because this hybrid technology was already in place since 2014, or at least the current engines, and this has a huge impact on the industry. And therefore, since it has an impact on the industry, you could why not say, well, thanks to the reduction of emissions that have generated thanks to the F1 technology applied to road cars, I've actually done quite a lot and achieved quite a lot in that front. And F1 has become, actually, there was one research I've seen once was showing that F1 is actually completely negative, because running 20 cars with this technology and the benefits of the millions of road cars running with hybrid technology, you're actually a negative. But in any case, I think that's a fun topic, a fun point, but it's not really the core point. The core point is the fact that, as you said, they have now a proper strategy going forward with a target 2030, and this target is on the regulation, so the engines, hybrid technology, and the engines, biofuels that will be implemented throughout, and running the cars. There are also a lot of initiatives taken by F1 to make the events more sustainable when it comes to how, bringing fans to an F1 circuit track. It's 150, sometimes 200,000, even more. That's a lot of people on the road or in the train. So you have to address this. You have to address recycling. How do you consume? When you have a glass of whatever, beer or something, you reduction of your plastic use, etc., etc. So there are some guidelines that also have been implemented and at this level. So promoter, constructors, and now, of course, teams. Teams we have developed recently in the last couple of years, also at team level, some sustainability initiatives around the reduction of single use of plastic, recycling, making sure that our factories are carbon neutral, like the Sauber factory was, etc. Trying to be a lot more efficient in terms of compensation when it comes to transporting people. So a lot of initiatives going around that. But I think the key point was really the decision of changing the regulations for 2026. So the next set of regulations coming for the next cycle of regulations arriving in 26. When this was announced in the summer of 22, actually this triggered immediately the decision, or actually not the decision, but the announcement of Audi coming into the sport. And this demonstrated that a company of this size, with the issues they had on Dieselgate, I'm sure you all remember, this side in going into a sport like Formula One, you really need to have a very strong foundation on which you can actually build a proper advertising campaign, communication campaign. You can actually associate to the technology to your products, etc., etc. So I think this is where a huge success for Formula One when it comes to being able to change the regulation in the sense that it becomes even more relevant for the manufacturers, OEMs out there, generating new brands coming into the sport, reinforcing the sport in general, and making this business quite a success as we can see it today.
Okay, very good point. There's one participant, Ayodele, you raised your hand. I don't know if you wanted to ask a question.
Wondering, can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, now we can hear you now.
I was just wondering as to the role of speed in the popularity of the Formula E versus the Formula One race schemes, because I know that the car racing is pretty much about speed, and that the Formula One cars are still, the traditional Formula One cars are still faster than the Formula E cars. Would that be the reason why Formula One is still much more popular than the Formula E racing circuits?
Yeah, you're right. That's probably one of the reasons for sure, that the cars are less impressive. They're less. They make a lot less noise, or a different kind of noise. The races are probably not as exciting. I would suppose so. I think the effect of speed. So it's a good point, because there was a lot of discussions regarding the noise of Formula One when they reduced the engine size, and people were complaining that F1 didn't make enough noise anymore. But it's true that F1 cars are extremely fast compared to a Formula E car, but you cannot really compare it directly, because remember, Formula E is not competing on the same tracks. They're racing in city circuits, whereby F1 have their proper circuits. It's a specific grade that you need to have on the circuit in order to race F1, because you need runoff areas, you need specific safety constructions to make sure that you can run cars at this speed. So I would say it's more about the concept itself rather than the speed, that probably didn't actually tick the box. It did tick the box at the beginning when it was all about the sustainability topics, and about we could bring racing back to center of towns. They had races in the middle of Paris, in the middle of a lot of cities. But I think it still didn't get the traction, man. And I think it comes back to the points we have discussed there, just before, and it's not for me just a question of speed, but it's a lot more in-depth issue, whereby you don't have, as a Formula One series, you probably don't have the legitimate. Well, you're not legit, or you probably don't have the history F1 has.
Yeah. Actually, when we studied F1 Formula E case, and I actually put a video with the sound of a Formula E car compared to a Formula One.
Yeah.
It's terrible. I mean, it's really not good. But okay, we have another person asking.
Yeah,
Vincent.
Vincent, yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Hi, Vincent.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you very well.
Perfect. Touching upon what you said about the noise, because in 2026 the new engine regulations are coming, and also with the increased component of the hybrid motor. Do you think it's possible, because right now we have a V6 in the back of them, that like the Formula One teams and the regulations are able to shift it back again to like the proper sounding engines of like a V8, V10, V12? Because also with the aspect in mind of sustainable fuels.
Yeah, it's a good question. Between you and I don't know. Technically, I don't have the answer to this question, but my gut feeling would be that no, because remember that aspect of technology which needs to be relevant to road cars. So if you have brands like Mercedes, Audi, Alpine, we're hearing about Ford coming back. We're hearing about Porsche sniffing around. They need the F1 needs to be relevant from a commercial standpoint in terms of its technology to what you could potentially buy. I remember the first Grand Prix I went to when in '94. My first race was in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And the two Ferrari, I would always remember during the test Friday morning free practice, there were the two Ferraris only on the track. There were two V12 engines. The sounds, I mean, it still remains today. It's just unbelievable. And at the time, you could, even super German brands like Audi had V10 in their big cars. You cannot find that anymore, and you can forget it. I mean, there's no way manufacturers will develop engines like that. So I don't think so, honestly. But I'm sure that they will still try to make sure that there's a bit of noise, because that was a huge topic. It's part of the experience. And I agree with you that when you go to an F1 race, it's part of the show. It's an integral part of it's the noise. You feel the power, the vibration, the smell. When a car goes in front of you at 300 kilometers per hour, it's screaming, and I think it's part of the show. So they cannot remove completely that component, because I cannot imagine 150,000 people watching cars going around for an hour and 45 minutes without any noise. I mean, it just doesn't make sense from a pure entertainment point of view. So I think we'll still have a bit of noise still remaining in these cars.
Yeah, and maybe let's go back to the Drive to Survive, Netflix series that has opened up the US American market big time. And maybe my first question is, why are you not on that show?
Me personally,
or the team? No. I mean, at least.
I understand the question. So we were there in 2018, and you have to understand that it was completely new. The culture of Formula One. When I say the culture of Formula One, so people working inside the paddock, we did not have the. They were not used to get a camera like this and the microphone above their head when they were talking about any kind of things that was not controlled by PR or their communications people. So that was something extremely new, probably scary for a few people. So that was one aspect, and the second aspect is that a lot of the people in the paddock, I'm talking high level, I'm talking management level, did not really understand how F1 could give access to Netflix with, I think they had 3 to 4 cameras in the paddock permanently, and access to everybody without paying or without having a kind of this traditional contract that a TV broadcaster would have. And they were complaining. I remember there was people complaining, say, "Why? How can you give that amount of access to Netflix, where, for example, Sky or Canal Plus or another, whatever, TV was paying millions to have access to at least into the paddock, but they didn't have all these cameras. Sometimes you have only one camera. They don't have access to the grid. Sometimes they have to pay more. I mean, so there was a lot of discussions behind the scenes on that point. All this is always linked to the business aspect of the Formula One teams. Remember at the beginning we said there was 3 streams of revenues for the teams. There was, the prize money, sponsorship, and contribution. The prize money basically is the money that you get from Formula One, who is getting their funds on selling TV rights and sponsorship around the track, and promoters. They're selling, each Grand Prix or each tracks are actually paying a fee to get Formula One. So this is a pool that is actually shared amongst all the teams. Netflix, we didn't pay in advance. It was kind of, the model is basically that they're paying their once with the subscriptions and stuff. And I think the amount was really quite low compared to other TV broadcasters.
Very interesting. Huh?
Yeah. So I think this created a lot of reactions within the paddock the first year. So that was the first element. The second element is second component, is the fact that there was an emotional aspect where the first year we were running with Charles Leclerc, who is now a big star at Ferrari, and Charles Leclerc was very close to a guy called Jules Bianchi, who died also in Formula One with an accident in Japan. And it was a very emotional topic for our for the people in our team. And of course, Netflix, when they started to interview Charles, they spoke about Jules, and because it's an American TV show. Remember, it's entertainment, and this is how they treat their, this is how they conceive their show, and this was the concept at the end of the day. Probably why it is so successful, because everything is brought like it's like a show. So this was the second aspect, which really didn't go down very well. So the second year we reduced, our management decided to reduce the access to the team for that reason, just to show that we probably were a little bit more a bit powerful, and it's all about, and you all have seen Drive to Survive, so it's a bit of an ego trip in there, so you have to show your muscles. But of course, you have on the year 2, because year 1 was so successful, season 1 was so successful that season 2, a lot of sponsors were saying, well, yeah, we'd love to be in the show because it's a lot of a new visibility opportunity. We're opening new markets. We look cool, we want to be in the show. So there was a very tough moment for us marketing guys, because we were stuck between a rock and a hard place, between the management, the old style culture, very old guard, and the new style and the new shift of culture within the paddock, and the pressure from the sponsors. So we've managed to rebuild the connections with Netflix, but then we were racing with Kimi Raikkonen, who decided that he didn't want to do much with them because he didn't understand why he shouldn't get a bit of a, carve out a bit of business out of that. So it was not an easy trip for us at Sauber. But funny, it's not just us. The first year there was no Ferrari was not in the show. Mercedes was not in the show. Now you have this the latest last year, it was Verstappen. It was not Max was extremely tough with the show and didn't want to participate, so you always get a bit of that. But at the end of the day, we managed to get a bit of coverage or some stories in there, and F1 is very happy with it. And funny, the thing that really made the difference, that was in Austin Grand Prix last year, no, 2 years ago, I'm sorry, 21. And coming out of the track, usually when you step in the cars and you go back to your hotel, you have fans, in the circuit trying to see the drivers and spot some drivers. And here in the US, which was not a Formula One market, suddenly, the fans were knowing the names of Gunther Steiner, of Fred Vasseur, of, Binotto, all these. So they knew a lot more about Formula One than just a couple of years back. So they made a huge step in this market just thanks to this show. So it was really a really big success.
Yeah. We were talking this morning, and a couple of the students are from the US, and they didn't know Formula One, of course, because no one knew, and now they're hooked because of the series. It's incredible how the content. I mean, the content is king these days, and authentic content, I guess. This is next. One topic. I mean, you also experience the pandemic, the Corona, COVID. And I guess all this digitalization, social media aspect, and it helped big time. But how did you guys manage? I mean, how did you guys manage as a Sauber team those 2 years with limited, no one watching the races on site, no experiences, or what was the mitigation measures that you guys did? How did you survive? Put it that way.
Yeah, very, very good, very good topic. I think the definition, you probably have to look more precisely at the definition of crisis, because we always think about crisis as something negative, but crisis is similar to, in terms of definition, the word definition of change, it's a change process, and this crisis actually accelerated a few things when it comes to servicing the sponsors. So the question was, when we were hit with the situation and we didn't know when we were going to go back racing, etc., we still had contracts with our sponsors, and we needed to deliver a number of services which were part of the contract. So the first phase,
the whole thing started in March 2020 in Melbourne.
Melbourne,
almost canceled that race, I think.
Yeah, we did. Actually, I think we came back on Friday night or Saturday night? Friday night.
It's canceled, okay.
So that was the first aspect, is to actually, being in touch with our partners and say, guys, we're all in the same boat. We understand we have contracts, but you also have businesses to run. It's really tough for you. Some factories were shut down everywhere around the world, so we had to renegotiate contracts, which was a pretty unpleasant part of the business. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about partnership, you really have to understand that it's, you're dealing with your partners. The second aspect was how to continue to engage with the fans, how to create the dialogue with the fans in a situation like this, when you had no racing, no show on the track. And this is where actually digital played a huge part, because we've started to create those behind the scenes, videos at home, etc. And the drivers actually were very good, and played a big part in the success of the campaign. They were actually really happy to support any kind of stupid ideas we're throwing at them at the time. And I think this is how we actually shifted completely the tone of voice, where we experienced that a little bit more closer interaction, more personal interaction, a little bit more less technical interaction with the drivers. We're actually doing better on social. So we actually kept that. Funny enough, this is why I started this answer with this crisis reference, because this crisis actually generated a portion of the strategy going forward. The other aspect is that we started to actually do exactly what we're doing now. So we are meeting and discussing online, and we've actually developed all our activities online. So part of the services we provide to sponsors are access to drivers, meet and greets, interviews. So we started like that. The second things we did factory tours. So you could actually be in front of your screen and visit the factory and see where the cars were built, etc. And we actually kept the idea when we started to race again. I think it was in June or July. June 21. We started to race again, and completely, it was completely closed. There was no public, no media, just the teams, and limited to I think 40, 65 people attending the per team. It was extremely controlled, but we kept the technology and we gave access to our sponsors or sponsors guests to the track, thanks to the tools like that, like this one, like Team. So we're doing live garage tours. We're still doing live interactions with the drivers, and we actually kept those assets. And now they are part of they were part of the commercial offers. So, the traditional offers would be, oh, you get a sticker on the car, you get some passes to access the track, you have a day with the driver in order to shoot your advertising campaign. And now we also add, well, you have a virtual experience in order to engage with your guests that are maybe on the other side of the planet when you're racing in Europe. So it's actually fully integrated now. So the crisis left a couple of good things, behind.
Very interesting. Thanks so much. Well, maybe another area that I wanted to touch with you is sort of how is a Formula One team managed, and how many people are working the team. I mean, also we have the students here, and the sports marketing students. They might want to join one of those teams. What type of roles are there? Maybe also touching how many sponsors do you guys have in a medium-sized team like Sauber? Because I know in Formula One in total, I think 300 brands, no? But how many do you guys have? 30, 40, 10?
Yeah, probably more than that in Formula One altogether. Because when I started in 2018, we probably had six sponsors, and when I left at the end of last year, we were counting 51.
51, partners, wow.
51, and so co-title, technical sponsors, all kind of partners, but still contracts. The number of people, so it depends on the team, because it's the same sport, but you have a very different kind of scale between the big teams and the smaller teams. A Mercedes or a big team like that, you're talking a couple of thousands of people for just south of that. For us, we were 550 people altogether, and that grew over the 4 years that I was there. When I joined, we were a bit less, but roughly 550. 550 people, which are designing, building, testing, operating the car, and marketing the team. Voilà. So that's roughly related directly to the operation. And of course, then you add IT, HR, facilities, and then finance on top of that. So that's roughly where the business, the profiles in the Formula One team is very diverse, because you have in terms of technical aspect, you have a lot of different kind of, the technology is so complex now that you need experts in every kind of areas, whether it's IT, aerodynamics, CFD, composite, you name it. And then in terms of marketing, usually you have a sales department, so someone who's doing the sponsorship acquisition, then supported by legal, of course. Then you have a marketing team, and this marketing team is taking care of the sponsors and promoting the team. You've got a communications team, you've got a digital team, and you've got a branding team, And finally, not last but not least, you've got hospitality team. So roughly these are the pillars that you find in the marketing department of the Formula One team. And each time you find specialists and people who are, really, really dedicated to this, to what they're doing. And of course, working closely with the drivers, providing services to the sponsors, making sure that they promote the team in the right way according to the guidelines and the sponsors they have. So it's a big operation. We were a small team, so my department when I left was 18 people. But you're talking Renault at the time. I don't know, 4 years ago, Renault, they were probably all together, including all the, Renault and the Formula One team is probably 35 people. So it's difficult to compare. I don't know how many people there at Mercedes, but it must be huge because you have to think that they're supported by the headquarters also. That it's a big operation. So at the end of the day, and extremely visible. So at the end of the day, you need the resources to run the show.
Yeah, again, but compared to your previous experience, and working for Rothmans, Lucky Strike, similar sizes, or it's changed in terms of the structure, then?
Yeah. Yes. Very. So Rothmans was in the 90s, and it was still a very traditional way of going racing. So I was working for an agency who was running the Rothmans account in Formula One. So the agency was quite small. At the time, we were doing everything in the press releases, and everything was done on paper pretty much. Then with Lucky Strike, then it was the sponsor, because the sponsor was also delivering a lot for the brand, and the sponsor, this is where the value was generated. So the sponsor Lucky Strike was employing a lot of resources when it comes to video, photo, PR, events, etc. So we had roughly also about 18 people just to run the Lucky Strike account, plus all the suppliers. When you needed to film, for example, you need to add an agency, etc. But it's roughly 18 to 20 people just to run this account at the time. It was a big investment from the tobacco industry. So you can see similarities in terms of number of people, but it's hard to compare because the setup and how the things are actually built is very different. Today, when Audi taking over Sauber, I'm sure that in three years' time, at the end of 25, you'll have complete different setup in the team, and probably most of the marketing and brand initiatives will be run by Audi headquarters rather than the team.
Mm-hmm. Okay, understood, of course. Got a question from Robin.
Yes. So how does it work? Because cigarette companies were sponsoring the Formula One. Is there not kind of a conflict between a high-performing athlete and then a cigarette company damaging the health? How did the marketing behind that work? And also, did it have a huge impact that the cigarette companies were banned from sponsoring F1?
Yeah, you're right. That's very interesting that you come back to that, because the last sponsorship, tobacco sponsorship, ended in 2006 by regulation imposed by the FIA, and it was an agreement between the FIA and the cigarette manufacturers, because they decided together that they wanted to be a more responsible business, and sponsorship did not guarantee that the brand, for example, was not visible to under 18 or people that didn't. It was difficult to control the visibility of the brand. So at the end of 2006, all the cigarette manufacturers except for one actually stopped their investment, which created a huge void, as you can remember, or probably imagine or remember, because there was a lot of money. these companies make a lot of money, and still today, but they have to spend it in a different way today, because they have so many legal restrictions around the world, and legislations that prevent them to do any kind of sponsorship or advertising or so on. To go back to the first part of your question, it created, I mean, there was not really a direct kind of health link between the two. As a matter of fact, when you talk about the sponsorship of a tobacco brand, it's more about the awareness that you generate, and it's you create this automatic recall on the brand, and since it's a very competitive business, you need to have an automatic recall on fast moving, FMCG, when you go to the shop, usually as a smoker, you take whatever, it's a Marlboro or another brand, usually it's the same, normally it's the same product, same effect. However, you have this marketing aspect around, which is extremely important, because that's the storytelling, and the storytelling is actually giving the value of the brand. This also applies in terms of pure marketing strategy. It applies in luxury, for example, with watches. How do you differentiate an automatic movement watch with another one on the market? I'm not going to name any watch, but I mean, how do you differentiate an IWC watch with a Rolex, or an IWC with a Jaeger-LeCoultre, whatever? It's not the technical aspect, because the technical aspect of the watch movement is 200 years old, is the same, but for a cigarette is the same. It's the marketing that you're creating on top, that storytelling, that is actually giving the value of the brand, and this is why you're paying these prices when you buy a high quality watch. Well, it was the same principle with tobacco. We were telling a story in a specific universe with specific messages, addressing to specific target consumers, with a very precise strategy and a very precise way of evaluating the sponsorship, so the effect, which was done, on different waves on every year, etc. And that actually made that the sponsorship made or helped the brand to create the content. Today we talk about content. At the time we were not really. We're talking about storytelling, but it's pretty much the same. It's basically using the team, the assets, the drivers, to create stories, to create content in order to address to your consumers. And how you tailor the story is basically where you create the value. I always said, look at Formula One. You have the same platform, Formula One cars, but one is selling drinks, the other one is selling cars, the other one is selling, whatever, other brands, crypto. But this platform is the same. So it's just, I'm telling you this just because just to prove that it's the marketing campaign that you do on top of your sponsorship that creates the value. And this is exactly what tobacco was doing. So when you were a Marlboro smoker, you were maybe seduced or targeted by Lucky Strike campaigns, thinking, wow, this is cool. And you're starting to understand the brand, and might be, why not shift to this brand as a consumer. This is not just for tobacco. It applies to all kind of sponsorship. But this is the mechanism.
Yeah. And also, we're talking about Marlboro, and there's another case study, the stickiness of that brand, being when they were not on the car, but everyone recognized it. So it was
very
great.
Interesting. That's fantastic. When you do sponsorship, if you do it well and this is extremely important to do it correctly, and this is not easy. It's not just about putting a sticker on the car and it runs by itself. You need a proper activation campaign, a proper strategy, a well thought through plan, and execution also in terms of quality, but also an evaluation. campaign to understand what effect it has on your consumers. But if you do this well, you create a halo effect on the consumer recognition, immediate recognition. So you can associate a color, and this was very true in Formula One back in the 90s, 2000s, where you could associate a color to a brand. You know, so for instance, it was a very interesting, I think it was in 2003 or 2004, so 10 years ago, no, 20 years ago, sorry. I think it was Camel, in the 90s, Camel pulled out of Formula One. I think it was the Williams car. Very famous because, you know, you had Senna racing on them, you know, Alain Prost, Mansell. And then Camel was not in the sport for at least 4, 5, 6 years, but still, because there was a car which was racing in yellow, the automatic recognitions for cigarette consumers were thinking that Camel was still in the sport. I'm talking 6 years later. Of course, this dropped down with the years, but it shows that if you do things correctly and if you leave an imprint, an impact on the sport, you're probably going to benefit from it even after you have pulled out from the sport.
Excellent. We have 2 questions. Vincent, first.
Yeah, one question following up on the tobacco thing. How was it possible then for Ferrari and McLaren to continue to indirectly promote like a sort of smaller corporation of Philip Morris and BAT? Because
so not with McLaren. BAT pulled out completely in 2006. I can tell you because I was working for them and had to find another job. But with Marlboro, and you're right, Marlboro, Philip Morris at the time did continue. They continued with Ferrari buying a sponsorship. You have to understand that they had different contracts running, so they were owning the livery of Ferrari, which was very unique in the sport. But they've decided not to brand, so you could not see the brand Marlboro. It was just you're right, huh, Vincent? It was a white and red car, but they were using, without mentioning the name or showing the brand or anything, they were using F1 to continue to entertain guests. So they had a hospitality program running above the garage at each race, and it was called, I can remember, it was not Mission Win, no, it was another one before that. There was another name for the concept, whereby if you're a consumer, you could win a competition to win a Grand Prix, you know, all these kind of marketing consumer initiatives that were going on. You're right, they were still paying without any branding at all. So you would never see the brand. And you remember recently we had Mission Winnow with this branding, which was a Philip Morris sub brand, which didn't really work. And they've now completely pulled out of the sports, and we're talking a sponsorship fee which was above 100 million a year.
Okay.
Amazing numbers.
Sorry if I'm allowed to ask a second question regarding the sponsorship of cryptocurrencies. How much did that actually reap a benefit for like the companies? Because it was
that's a very good question, Vincent. Yeah, it's extremely clever question. So you're right, because I think recently it was the era, the crypto era, and we saw a lot of crypto brands coming into the sport, not only Formula One, by the way. The way we experienced it, or I experienced it, I can maybe tell you, and probably this will probably give you a hint. First of all, you have 2 things. You have the cryptocurrency as a sponsor, and you have the crypto platforms. So these are 2 kind of businesses, and usually the business categories that we separate when we sell sponsorship. The complexity is that some of the crypto platforms have also their own coin. If you take Binance, for example. So if you take Binance as a sponsor, you cannot sell a sponsorship to cryptocurrency because it's integrated in there. It's part of their business category. The way I saw it, Vincent, was the cryptocurrency invested in Formula One in order to create a lot of awareness on the product they were putting on the market. By the time the car was launched or the announcement was made about the cryptocurrency and the noise that was created around the crypto, thanks to social media announcements, PR, whatever, the financial transactions were so high that the sponsorship was already recouped at the beginning. They didn't really care if, I'm talking on their behalf, but my feeling is that they didn't really care about the longevity, the marketing, etc. It was just about putting a coin in the market, selling enough to make money, they were covering the sponsorship fee, and sometimes you were talking millions, and with an S, and off they went. The platform's a bit different. The platform is about awareness, tracking because Formula One is seen by so many consumers, so many people around the planet, and it's a technology platform or technology sport. You can say, okay, come and trade with us. We're fast, we're super safe, all these values that you find in Formula One. And therefore, that's relevant to attract new consumers or new users for your exchange platform. Binance is a very good example of that one.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah. Looking at time, I think we're almost finishing, or we're run over. Thanks so much, Jan. Maybe just to finalize, on your thoughts about, maybe it's not an easy answer, but how do you see the future of the Formula One? What are the challenges? Oh, okay, we have one question before you go to that. Carl Friedrich, raise your hand.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. Wait. It's.
We can hear you.
Yes. Hi. I have a small question regarding how it is in the times where you got sponsors. How did you also tried to keep these sponsors on one hand? Because in my situation, we are trying to get sponsors in the direction that they have certain VIP access, obviously, on the racetrack. In addition, also trying to get them more included into the team. But I have realized that, for example, Formula One teams are very strict on their partnership with customers and their sponsors, with not allowing everyone going to access, because in my opinion, or in sponsors, they want to be part of the team. They want to see what's happening behind the scenes, and how does the Formula One more or less treat customers at a race weekend, for example.
Yeah. Wow, very, very interesting, and very business-led question. You already have a lot of business case or questions in your mind when you ask this question, so it's very interesting. The first point is retaining sponsors. I always said to my boss, it's very hard to sign a sponsorship deal, but it's even harder to keep it, because you need to constantly, first of all, build a relationship, for sure. It's like any kind of relationship, but you need to constantly come up with things that are projects, with services that are relevant to their business. And how fast things are moving on the market today because of digital, because of different crises, inflation, war, COVID, whatever. You need to adapt, and therefore this is why I think you need to be ready to be agile in order to make sure that you keep your sponsors in that specific situation. So I agree with you, difficult to keep them, but it's all about proving that you generate value through the execution of their partnership activation, coming up with being flexible and agile. So for example, if a sponsor says in the middle of the contract, well, I don't want doing hospitality anymore because it's not working for us in terms of business. We need to focus more on digital, for example. Well, I think as a rights holder, in today's world, you need to be open to actually change the contract a little bit in order to keep that sponsor. Otherwise, if you're very, very strict and say, hey, you know what, you've got 2 years or 3 years of contract, these are your 5 tickets, this is your logo, and that's, I'm making things simple, but and that's it. And 3 years down the line, these guys have to use the same thing. I think you probably have a bit of a problem. The second aspect is of your question was the access. I think you were trying to mention the access. The fact that it's very exclusive. Yeah. I think, yeah, you're right. But remember that it's, sometimes I compare it with the luxury brand. I worked for IWC also for 8 years, so Group of Richemont. So they own Cartier, Montblanc, these big brands. So you understand a bit the luxury here. And Formula One is very that, it's extremely positioned, extremely high, it's extremely expensive, it's extremely exclusive. And this is why it makes it very interesting, because you want to go behind the scenes, you want to be in the garage as a guest, you want to be in that paddock. And basically this is why F1 is so difficult to access, because it's limited. If you had thousands of people in the paddock every weekend, I don't think you could sell, or I mean, the position of the sport would not be as exclusive. So how do you go around that? Well, first of all, you have to work in a clever way. So you have to make sure that every single piece of assets, rights, benefits is actually used strategically and used efficiently with a business mind. So what kind of results do you get by, let's say you're inviting someone. If I'm a brand, I have a limited number of passes. I'm just saying, just for the answer, 10 passes for the year. I'm not going to invite the cousin of my sister, because whoever, or because he loves Formula One. No, you need to think business. What is that going to impact on your business? So I think this is one aspect. And the second aspect is being clever about the rights that you have. We talked earlier about the digital, for example, tools such as this team experience that we're having right now. You could create something out of that, which is not as expensive, because you don't send people around the world to visit a race, but you could potentially have a driver meeting your guests, your customers in front of a screen. So I think it's sponsorship it looks great on the outside, but I think it's really about being extremely professional about it. And then first of all, understand the key objectives of your client, your customer, so therefore the partner. B, being creative, agile, deliver against the objective. If someone tells you, well, I'm interested to come in Formula One because I need to create content for my channels, and you give them a contract where they have hospitality and advertising rights, they're going to tell you, well, it's irrelevant for me. Whether it's 1 million or 50 million, it's not a question of it's not the price. The issue is that this is not working for me. So you have to adapt, your strategy, your offer according to the objectives of a brand. This is extremely important. I remember we had one. I give you one example. We had one brand who was not interested in any branding, so they were paying a sponsorship fee. But what they wanted is those passes that get you access into the paddock. Those famous passes you see everybody around with, because they wanted to access not only our team network but the paddock. And these guys were very clever. They came in at some races with so it was basically the CEO with his sales guy, and he was coming into the paddock, spending time in the hospitality, meeting all our co-sponsors, selling his services to our co-sponsors. And when he finished with that on day 2, he was going into the paddock and meeting people, giving business cards and stuff. And his evaluation, so how he evaluated the success of his partnership, was the amount of business he was doing at the end of each year. So that's one example. But you see, if it's precisely defined at the beginning of the relationship, you can actually help them deliver on that. I have some other examples, but you know, it's a good question on that that business aspect.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl, for the question. Jan, maybe final 1 minute.
No problem.
Comments on how do you see the future of Formula One?
Yes. Well, at the moment, everything is green light. New sponsors, new manufacturers, new events, new broadcasters, a new Netflix series. Everything is very, very good. But you all know the situation, Ukraine, inflation, what God knows what's going to happen, you know. How, if the global business, the global economy is actually slowing down, I cannot see F1 living on its own island, because I don't think it would be making any sense. You know, there's too many huge companies, organizations, businesses, nations involved in this sport, meaning that if they're impacted, there's a consequence, you know, at the end of the day that could come to Formula One. So Formula One, I'm sure, you know, there's some very clever people up there, need to be extremely cautious when it comes to the next few years, because you know, at the moment it's going very well. They're surfing the right wave, and the wave is long, powerful, everything is good, but every wave tend to die at some point. So I think this is something, I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, but you know, knowing the economy, if the economy is slowing down, I would be also careful, or maybe a little bit more conservative when it comes to investment and you know, opening new territories and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, true. Very wise words. Well, Jan, thanks so much for your time, your insights. I mean, I think was great.
You're welcome.
I mean, we have still 120 people now listening, so that's good sign after more than 75 minutes. Awesome, Jan. Well, all the best for your future. Now I know something is coming up for you. We're looking forward to see what it is. And yeah.
And if you need any information, I mean, you can have my LinkedIn or whatever. I mean, you know, if you need any help in your I don't know. I'm you know my name. You can find me on LinkedIn quite easily. And if you want to have another discussion on one day, I would be happy. It was great to meet you all, guys.
Thanks so much, Jan, for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, ciao.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ciao, Terry.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.